The rooftop terrace of Sterling Corporation glittered 40 floors above the city, champagne flutes catching light like scattered sparks. Olivia Sterling stood at the center of it all, red dress, sharp eyes, a woman who commanded every room she entered without having to try. Somewhere beneath her gaze, a man in gray moved quietly through the thinning crowd with a mop, invisible to everyone present. When a guest spilled wine near the VIP section, she smiled cold, deliberate, and said just loud enough to carry, "I bet he won't last 5 minutes." By the time sunrise touched the glass walls above them, only one of them was still standing, and it wasn't the one she expected. Daniel Carter had not planned to be here tonight. He had finished his regular shift at the Meridian office complex 2 blocks west, stripped the mop head, logged his hours, and was halfway to his car when the call came in. The rooftop venue at Sterling Tower needed extra coverage. One of their night cleaners had called in sick. The agency was short-staffed. His supervisor's voice carried the particular fatigue of someone who already knew the answer before asking. Daniel said yes before he hung up. It was always yes. He changed into the spare uniform he kept in the back of his car, light gray shirt, dark gray trousers, black work shoes, and drove the 2 blocks back the way he had come. The uniform fit well. It always had. It was the only thing from this part of his life that ever had. 3 years ago, Daniel Carter had sat in a glass-walled office on the 14th floor of this same building. His title had been Senior Systems Engineer. He had spent 4 years designing and maintaining the infrastructure that kept Sterling Corporation's internal networks running, servers, failover systems, the kind of architecture that was invisible when it worked and catastrophic when it didn't. He had been good at it. He knew this without ego, the same way a carpenter knows the trueness of a joint before the wood dries. Then came the incident. A server cluster in the secondary data center had failed during a major client presentation. 40 minutes of downtime. The kind of failure that cost accounts, not just dollars. Someone had to take responsibility, and the investigation, swift, thorough, and deeply convenient, had pointed toward a misconfiguration in a maintenance protocol Daniel had last touched 18 months prior. He had tried to explain. He had documentation. He had logs. It hadn't mattered. The termination had been quiet and efficient. A Friday afternoon, a cardboard box, a handshake from an HR manager whose name he had already forgotten. He hadn't fought it. Lily was 3 months old, and her mother had left 6 weeks after she was born. Fighting a wrongful termination would have meant lawyers, and lawyers meant money he didn't have, and money he didn't have meant Lily went without. The math had been simple and brutal, and he had done it in under a minute. So Daniel Carter had walked out of Sterling Tower with a cardboard box, and he had not looked back. That was not entirely true. He had looked back many times, but looking back was free, and it cost nothing but sleep. Now he lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Garfield Street, the smaller room, so specifically Lily's, that it seemed to generate its own warmth. Dinosaur drawings taped to the walls, a shelf of illustrated books with spines worn soft from repeated reading. A small humidifier running at night because Lily's lungs were what her pediatrician called a little sensitive, which was doctor language for something Daniel had learned not to say out loud in front of her. She was 7 years old. She laughed like something was always genuinely funny. She called him Dad with a weight of trust that no title in any corporation had come close to matching. He pressed the elevator button for the rooftop. The doors opened onto a different world. The party was already in full motion when Daniel stepped out onto the terrace. Strings of warm light hung between low structural columns. Servers moved through the crowd carrying trays of champagne and small plates of things that cost more per bite than Daniel's weekly grocery budget. The guest list numbered perhaps 80, not many, but their collective presence compressed the rooftop into something dense and intentional. These were people who networked the way others breathed, naturally, continuously, without visible effort. Daniel kept to the perimeter. His briefing from Spencer, the venue manager, had been quick and clipped. Stay mobile, keep the floor clean. Handle spills, remain unobtrusive. The last instruction had been delivered with a particular emphasis that Daniel understood completely. Be invisible. He was good at that too. He was working the far edge of the terrace, collecting empty glasses from a low stone ledge, when the voice cut through a sharp, carrying complaint from the direction of the VIP section. A man in a navy suit had knocked his champagne, and a wide arc of gold-tinted liquid spread across the pale tile, reaching the edge of the reserved area's carpeted boundary. The man looked down at it with the particular helplessness of someone who expected problems to resolve themselves. Daniel moved immediately, cart in hand. He was 3 steps away when a woman's voice cut across the ambient sound of the party with practiced precision. Is that really the best we could arrange for this evening? He didn't need to look up to know the voice belonged to someone important. He looked up anyway. Olivia Sterling was exactly what the business publications made her out to be, which was itself remarkable, since most people photographed well and presented otherwise. She stood near the VIP section's frosted glass partition. The red dress, a deliberate choice in a room full of black and navy, her blonde hair swept back. She was looking at Daniel with an expression that wasn't quite contempt. Contempt was too raw, too honest, but something more refined. The look of someone evaluating whether a piece of furniture was in the wrong room. He'll handle it, Marcus Hale said from beside her. He was the kind of man who always had something to add. He's just cleaning staff. I can see that, Olivia said. The champagne guest made a small sound of agreement with no one in particular. Daniel kept moving. He reached the spill, set down the cart, unfolded a clean cloth. Marcus stepped slightly closer to Olivia, his voice dropping just enough to carry to her alone. People like that, you'd be surprised how fast they fold. A little pressure. He tilted his glass. They're not built for it. Olivia didn't respond immediately. She was watching Daniel work the economy of motion, the absence of anything wasted. Something behind her eyes shifted. Not warmth. Not yet. More like the activation of a particular kind of curiosity, the sort that didn't always lead somewhere good. Is that right? She said. It wasn't a question. What happened next had the quality of a performance that had been rehearsed without anyone knowing they were rehearsing. Olivia Sterling straightened, set her champagne flute on the nearest surface with a soft click of finality, and raised her voice just enough to reach the half-dozen guests closest to the VIP section. Excuse me. Daniel was on one knee finishing the tile when he heard it. He looked up. She was looking directly at him. Come here, she said. He rose, folded the cloth, stood. Across the roof, a few conversations had paused in the unconscious way people pause when something more interesting appears. Olivia crossed the distance between them with the unhurried pace of someone who had never in her adult life needed to move quickly because something was running away from her. She stopped 2 feet in front of Daniel and looked up. He had perhaps 4 inches on her, with the composed evaluation of a judge deciding whether a case was worth hearing. I want to try something, she said. Daniel said nothing. You'll stay exactly here. This section, this floor. You won't sit down, you won't step away, and you'll respond to anything my guests need. She paused. The pause was for the benefit of the small audience forming around them. 5 minutes. Think you can manage that? Someone in the growing cluster laughed, not cruelly, exactly, but with the ease of people already positioned on the winning side. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He glanced down. His phone was clipped to the cart, the screen just visible in the ambient light. The wallpaper was a photograph. Lily asleep in the back seat of his car after a pediatric appointment, her head tilted, lips barely parted. He had taken it at a red light on the way home. He had never deleted it. He looked back up. Fine, he said. Olivia smiled slow, reaching the corners of the mouth without reaching the eyes. She turned to Marcus and the nearest guests with the ease of someone who has already won. 5 minutes, she said, for the benefit of everyone. I expect he'll decide his time is better spent elsewhere. The laughter that followed was general and settled the laughter of a crowd given something to watch. Daniel positioned himself where he'd been told. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at Olivia. He looked at the section of floor he was responsible for, and he began to work. The first guest approached within 30 seconds. A broad-shouldered man in his 50s, too much cologne, the particular ruddy complexion of someone who attended many parties exactly like this, held out an empty flute without making eye contact. Another champagne. Daniel took the flute and turned toward the drink station. Actually, the man said, before Daniel had taken a step, I changed my mind. Sparkling water. Daniel turned back, with ice. And a lemon wedge. He turned again. Make it lime. A ripple of laughter moved through the small cluster that had stayed to watch. It had the quality of rehearsed spontaneity, the kind of cruelty that presents itself as playfulness. The next challenge came several minutes later. A younger man in his early 30s walked through the VIP perimeter holding a fresh glass of red wine and stumbled with theatrical precision, sending a generous pour across the front of Daniel's gray shirt. The silence that followed was brief and loud. Terribly sorry, the man said, in a voice that suggested otherwise. Daniel looked down at his shirt. The stain spread in a slow bloom through the gray fabric. He reached for the clean cloth on his cart. Careful, someone called from the edge of the group. The laughter this time was louder. A woman near the bar began recording on her phone, angling carefully to capture Daniel as he blotted the wine with quiet efficiency. From her position near the frosted partition, Olivia Sterling watched. She held a fresh glass, but had not drunk from it. Something in her posture had stiffened, not enough for anyone beside her to notice, but present. Marcus noticed. He misread it entirely. It's working, he said. Olivia said nothing. The requests continued. Someone needed a specific drink that required Daniel to cross the terrace twice. Someone dropped a plate of hors d'oeuvres with the deliberateness of a child pushing something off a table to see what would happen. Each time, Daniel moved without comment, cleaning, retrieving, responding. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at Olivia. He looked at whatever task was directly in front of him and addressed it with the full, undivided attention of someone who had decided that everything else in the room, the laughter, the recording, the running commentary from people who had never cleaned anything in their lives, was simply not part of his reality. Marcus leaned toward one of the watching guests and said something low that produced another wave of laughter. He was good at this, finding the frequency of a crowd and broadcasting on it. He had been doing it his entire career. Olivia turned to look at Marcus for the first time in several minutes. He was grinning. She looked back at Daniel. He was on his knees again, cleaning the scattered plate. The gap between what Marcus found entertaining and what Olivia was currently experiencing opened barely a hairline. Nothing visible from the outside. But Olivia Sterling had built a company by paying attention to small shifts, and this one was registering. She took a sip of her champagne at last. It tasted like nothing in particular. No one had been watching the time precisely. In the flow of laughter and wine, minutes had dissolved into one another, and it was only when Marcus glanced at his watch and looked up with an expression of mild surprise that anyone thought to calculate. It's been 5 minutes, he said. The small cluster that had stayed to watch turned. Daniel was still there. He was repositioning his cart along the terrace railing, working methodically along the section's perimeter, collecting plates left on a low ledge. His shirt was stained. His expression was unchanged. He was working with the same unhurried precision he had brought to the very first task. He had not moved from the section. He had not reacted. He had not folded. The silence that followed was brief, but complete, the held-breath quality of a crowd that had been expecting a particular ending and had arrived at a different one. Olivia set her glass down. She crossed to Daniel slowly. The remaining guests watched with the attention of people who had understood that the nature of what they were watching had just changed. She stopped in front of him. He straightened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. In that space, something passed between them, not warmth, not recognition, but the particular quality of attention two people exchange when they have stopped performing for anyone else. "You're still here," she said. It was not the sentence she had planned. "You didn't set a time limit," Daniel said. His voice was even, without inflection. Something crossed her face, not embarrassment, exactly, but proximity to it. She recovered quickly. Olivia Sterling always recovered quickly. She turned to the remaining guests and delivered the reset with practiced lightness. "Let's make the terms clear. Stay until I say otherwise." There was a murmur smaller than before, the crowd having thinned, and someone raised a glass in vague endorsement. She turned back to Daniel. He was already looking at her. Not with defiance, not with the specific heat of someone insulted, with something quieter than either the look of a man who had already decided how this night was going to end, and who had not particularly needed her to understand that. He turned back to his work. Olivia watched him for 3 full seconds before turning away. Marcus appeared at her shoulder. "Yes," she said. Her voice had lost, just slightly, its edge. By 10 o'clock, the party had shifted into a slower register. The performances were finished, the speeches, the posed photographs, the careful mingling that had been the evening's official business. The remaining guests drank with more commitment and talked with less intention, clustering in the comfortable configurations of people who no longer needed to impress each other. Daniel worked. He had moved into the quiet rhythm that comes only after hours of sustained physical labor, the place where the body runs efficiently and the mind empties out. He had been in this state many times before. It was not unpleasant. It was one of the few states in which the full weight of his life did not press down with any particular force. By 11, nearly half the guests had gone. The music from the embedded speakers dropped to a lower volume, something instrumental and barely present. Olivia Sterling had not left. She sat at the edge of the VIP section, the red dress vivid against the muted outdoor furniture, holding a champagne flute she had poured 40 minutes ago and not finished. She had declined 3 invitations to continue elsewhere. She had checked her phone twice and opened nothing. She was watching Daniel work. Not continuously, she was too practiced for that, too aware of how sustained observation looks when it becomes visible. But, in intervals, a glance that lingered, a return to the middle distance that didn't quite hold. At midnight, the terrace held fewer than 30 people. The city below was still awake in its insomniac way, 1,000 lit windows pushing back against the dark. At 1 in the morning, while a small group talked in low voices near the far railing and a server cleared the last food station, Daniel stopped for the first time. He stood near the terrace's eastern ledge, looking out over the city. Not leaning, not resting, just standing. A man taking 45 seconds that he had earned. In that time, his expression changed in ways that were not quite visible from across the terrace, but that Olivia, watching from her chair, understood were happening. She had the sudden and specific intuition that he was thinking about someone, not about the terrace, not about her. The thought landed with more weight than she expected. She found herself wondering what she would be thinking about if she were standing at that railing alone at 1 in the morning. The answer came quickly and was not comfortable. Work, probably. The next quarter, which was, she realized, the same thing. Daniel turned back from the railing and returned to work. She looked away. By 3 in the morning, 11 people remained on the terrace, including her and him. The temperature had dropped. One of the remaining servers had brought Olivia a jacket from the coat room. Daniel had declined a similar offer and simply kept moving, his body generating its own warmth through sustained motion. She watched him kneel beside a spilled glass near the eastern section and clean it with the same unhurried attention he had brought to every task since the beginning. She thought about the word endurance. She had always considered it the quality of people with no other options, the absence of alternatives dressed up as virtue. She had built her career on choices on levers, on the ability to change course when a situation became untenable. Daniel Carter had not changed course. He had not even looked like he was considering it. She did not yet know what to do with this. It was 3:47 in the morning when the lights on the eastern side of the rooftop flickered. At first, it seemed like a simple fluctuation, the kind that happened in older buildings when the HVAC shifted overnight loads. 2 of the terrace's lighting strips went dark, and the ambient warmth of the space contracted by a noticeable degree. Then, Olivia's phone vibrated with a message from the building's facilities manager. The message contained the word server, and she was on her feet before she finished reading it. Sterling Corporation's primary data hub occupied the 15th floor. It housed not only internal operations infrastructure, but the active transaction systems for 3 enterprise clients. Clients whose contracts collectively represented nearly $40 million in annual revenue. A fault in the cooling management system had triggered a cascade failover, and the on-call technical team was currently unable to restore service. The backup protocols required a physical access sequence at the server rack level. She called her IT director. He answered on the first ring, which told her he had been waiting for it. "How long?" she asked. 40 minutes. Best case. The junior tech on call has never executed that protocol manually. Get someone senior on site. 45 minutes out. Nearest one is in Westfield. She closed her eyes for 3 full seconds. She was still holding the phone when Daniel Carter stepped past her toward the elevator bay. "The cooling system failover," he said. "The manual recovery on that rack sequence is a specific process. Whoever's down there is probably addressing it in the wrong order." She stared at him. "How do you know the server configuration on 15? He was quiet for a moment, the measured pause of a man deciding how much of a door to open. "I designed it," he said. The words landed with a weight that rearranged everything. She processed it. Her processing speed was normally something she relied on. Now it felt slower than she wanted. "You're Daniel Carter," she said. He looked at her steadily. "I know what that system needs," he said. "I can have it running in 15 minutes. If you'll let me go down." There was a version of Olivia Sterling, the one who had existed before tonight, who would have calculated the liability exposure of this exact scenario and called her legal team. The woman, standing at the elevator bay at 3:47 in the morning, did not call her legal team. "Go," she said. He went. On the 15th floor, she found the junior technician, a young man named Owen, approximately 22 years old, visibly panicked, and Daniel, who had already opened the secondary access panel and was moving through the physical recovery sequence with the calm efficiency of someone in the place where their knowledge lived deepest. He spoke as he worked, not explaining himself, but narrating each step as an audit trail. "Override the thermal hold first, yes. That switch, then reset from the tertiary node, not the primary. Primary will follow automatically." Owen followed each instruction with trembling precision. 14 minutes later, the indicator panels shifted from amber to green. Olivia stood in the doorway and watched. They rode the elevator back to the rooftop in silence. The few remaining guests had gathered near the terrace entrance, sensing the conclusion of something, and dispersed quietly when Olivia appeared. Spencer, the venue manager, began directing the final cleanup with the grateful efficiency of a man who had been waiting for permission. Daniel returned to the section he had been assigned his section and picked up the cloth he had set down during the server emergency. Olivia did not follow the departing guests. She did not take out her phone. She stood near the railing. The city was beginning its 5 in the morning transformation. The deepest dark had passed. Not light yet, not exactly, but something between. The slow retraction of night, a first suggestion of gray at the eastern edge of the sky. She heard his footsteps stop somewhere behind her. "You could go," she said, without turning. "The bet's over. You've been here all night." "I know," he said. She turned. He was standing 10 feet away, his shirt stained, his jaw shadowed with early morning stubble, his eyes carrying the settled weight of sustained wakefulness. Not dramatic fatigue, not the kind that wants to be noticed, but the quiet exhaustion of someone who has simply been present for a very long time. She crossed the distance between them and stopped. They were, for the first time all evening, standing at exactly the same level. No platform, no section barrier, no crowd between them. She looked at him directly. The habit of her professional life was to ask questions designed to reveal the other person's weakness, the hesitation, the over-explanation, the telltale crack. She had asked thousands of questions this way. This was a different kind of asking. "Why didn't you quit?" she said. He didn't answer immediately. He had the quality of someone who didn't fill silences simply because they existed. "Because someone is waiting for me to come home," he said. It was a simple sentence. It had no rhetorical design. It did not reach for anything. It did not expect anything from her. It was simply true. Olivia had spent 14 years building an argument in the private architecture of her beliefs that strength was a function of detachment, that the people who couldn't be touched were the ones who couldn't be moved. She had applied this logic to herself with the rigor of an engineer. She had applied it to the people around her as a sorting mechanism. The man standing in front of her had been insulted, overworked, stained, recorded, and publicly humiliated across the length of a single night. He had not been moved. But he was also the least detached person she had ever stood this close to. These two things did not compute, and Olivia Sterling had built her entire professional life on things that computed. "Who's waiting?" she asked. It was the quietest she had spoken all night. She had not planned to ask it. He reached into his pocket and held out his phone. The screen showed the wallpaper photograph. Lily, asleep in the back seat, head tilted, lips barely parted. The expression of a child who has no reason to doubt the world is safe. Olivia looked at it for a long moment. "Her name is Lily," he said. "She's 7. She's been asleep since 9. The city below was beginning, almost imperceptibly, to lighten. She handed the phone back without speaking. She did not look away quickly, the way people do when unexpectedly moved and don't want it noticed. She looked at him steadily, with the full attention she had given to very few things in her life. By 6 in the morning, the rooftop was empty. Spencer had departed with the subdued gratitude of someone who had witnessed more than he'd intended and had no interest in discussing any of it. The decorative lighting had been switched off. The city below had entered full dawn pale gold. The sun not yet visible, but its presence announced across every glass surface in sight. Olivia Sterling stood at the center of the empty terrace and made 3 phone calls in quick succession. The first was to her head of operations, reached at home, apologized to for the hour, and given a single instruction. The second was to HR, who answered with the alertness of someone who had not been sleeping anyway, and who received a similar instruction with a notably different tone. The third was to Marcus Hale's voicemail, which received a short, precise message that made the nature of Monday morning perfectly clear. Then, she walked to where Daniel was finishing the last section of floor. "The server recovery you executed tonight," she said, "prevented an outage our internal team has since estimated would have cost this company somewhere between $1 and $3 million in penalties, emergency contracts, and reputational damage." She paused. "You did that while serving drinks and mopping floors. While being treated the way you were treated." He continued working. "I know why you left," she said. "Or why you were asked to leave. I reviewed your file 3 hours ago. There are records of your objections to the maintenance protocol. There are logs showing the configuration was altered after your last access. I don't know yet how far the negligence goes or whether it was worse than negligence." She stopped. "But I know it wasn't you." He was still for a moment. Then he resumed work. "I owe you a public apology," she said. "And I'll give you one. In front of the same people who were here tonight, if that's what you want." "That's not necessary," Daniel said. "I think it is." He looked at her. She looked back. "Marcus is done. Today. The investigation into the original incident starts Monday." She steadied herself, because what came next was not something Olivia Sterling did easily. "And I would like you to come back. As a senior engineer, the role you should have kept." The terrace was very quiet. Daniel straightened. He set the cloth on the cart carefully, the way he did everything. He looked at her with the same steady attention he had given all night, the look that took nothing and gave nothing away, just present. "I'll think about it," he said. She had expected this, on some level. She had not expected it to feel entirely reasonable. "Take your time," she said. He nodded once, collected his cart, and walked toward the elevator. At the doors, he paused, not dramatically, not for effect, with the quality of someone who simply takes a moment when a moment is warranted. Then he stepped inside. The doors closed. Olivia stood alone on the empty rooftop as full dawn spread across the city below her. Lily was awake when Daniel came through the door. This was not unusual. Mrs. Flores from next door, who stayed the nights Daniel's late shifts ran long. had already gotten her dressed and made her toast. Lily was sitting at the small kitchen table in her dinosaur shirt, a half-eaten piece of toast beside her, when he walked in. She looked at him for a long moment, the stained shirt, the stubble, the eyes with their dawn quality, and then she got up and walked across the kitchen and put her arms around his waist without saying anything. He held her there for a while. "You look tired, Dad," she said, into his side. "I am a little," he said. "Did something happen?" "A lot of things happened." She pulled back and looked up at him with the seriousness of a 7-year-old who takes information seriously. "Good things or bad things?" He considered this with the care it deserved. "I think they might be turning into good things," he said. She accepted this and went back to her toast. He sat across from her, still in his work clothes, and poured himself a glass of water and drank it slowly. His phone buzzed on the table between them. A local number he didn't recognize, but the exchange was familiar. Lily looked at the phone, then at him. He picked it up. The message was short. "I hope she's well. And I meant what I said. No pressure. But I hope you'll consider it. O.S." He read it twice. He set the phone face down on the table. Lily was watching him with patient attention. "Who is it?" she asked. "Someone from work," he said. "The new work or the old work?" He thought about this for a moment longer than the question seemed to require. "The old work?" he said. Turning into something else. She seemed satisfied with this and returned to her toast. 10 days later, Olivia Sterling was in her corner office on the 28th floor when her assistant told her Daniel Carter had arrived and was waiting in reception. She stood up. She was aware that she was doing both things with more deliberateness than the situation required, and she noted this without acting on it. He was standing near the window when she came out, looking at the city below with the quality of someone deciding rather than waiting. He turned when he heard her. She looked different in the daylight, he thought. Or perhaps she was different. Or perhaps both things were true. The red dress had been replaced by something simpler. Her hair was down. She looked, for the first time since he had known her, like a person who was not performing anything. "I have conditions," he said. "I expected you would," she said. "I want it in writing." The reinstatement, the full investigation, the scope of the original incident, reviewed and formally documented. "It's already drafted. I had it prepared 4 days ago." He nodded slowly. "Then yes," he said. "I'll come back." She held out her hand. He shook it. Neither of them let go immediately. The moment stretched, not awkward, not staged, but present in the way that certain moments simply are, requiring nothing added to them. Outside, the city moved in its steady, indifferent way. Inside, in the space between two people who had stood on opposite sides of something terrible and were now, carefully, beginning to stand on the same side, something shifted. Not a resolution, not yet an ending. A beginning, held lightly, still uncertain, with everything still ahead.